Chapter 16. Witnesses. Americana saw a blur of light, quite pale, gradually taking shape. She could still feel the cold coursing through her veins, through her innermost parts. Everything felt weightless, as if her body had no mass, no allegiance to any law of gravity. She heard an inner sound, like a balloon inflating and deflating in rhythm. Then she realized that sound was her own breath. The images began to settle into clearer shapes, things her mind could now recognize. It was grass. Green grass, freshly cut. She could still smell it, still feel the dampness rising from it. She became aware that her face was pressed against the grass, as if it were a pillow. Slowly, she rose. It felt like waking from a long and heavy sleep, until everything became clearer. The sound had returned to normal. Vision discernible. Americana, Wooey, Astayam, Eho, and Papandakern were rising from the grass. "Feels like I've been rebooted several times," said Papandakern. His eyes displayed a software update icon. Americana stood up, and the others began adjusting as well, returning to consciousness, to their usual states. It was daytime. The sun shone with great intensity. The sky, a deep blue. Several two-story houses stood perfectly aligned, each with white picket fences. An American flag fluttered gently on the porch. On the wall of the veranda, a banner stretched wide, with red, white, and blue letters. Happy 4th of July. Suddenly, a faint aroma of apple pie filled the air. The front door of the house opened. A young couple appeared, smiling. Far too beautiful. The woman wore a white dress patterned with stars. The man had on a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. They looked like they had stepped straight out of a magazine ad. "Welcome," the woman said with enthusiasm. "What an honor to have you. We've been waiting. Come in, come in. Everything's already set for dinner," said the man, spreading his arms in a welcoming gesture. Behind the couple, two curious little faces peeked out. A 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress with freckles, and a little boy wearing a blue cap, clutching a stuffed owl. A golden Labrador shot out the door like a rocket, tail wagging, charging straight at Papandakern. "Alert! Imminent canine interaction," shouted the robotic panda, spinning in place. "Buddy, wait. At this rate, you'll knock me to the ground." But it was too late. The dog had already leaped on Papandakern and was now licking the plush, robot's entire visor. The children burst into laughter as they watched Papandakern crawling through the grass with the Labrador on top of him. The couple laughed too. Americana, Wooey, Astayam, Nio, and Papandakern were invited into the couple's house. The interior looked as if it had been arranged the day before. White curtains, perfectly aligned, pale wooden floors, and vases of flowers placed on nearly every surface. "Did you come from an opera?" the woman asked with a smile. "You're all so elegant. Would you like to change into something more comfortable?" Without waiting for a reply, the woman pointed down a hallway. "We left a few clothing options in the rooms at the back. Make yourselves at home. Everything is clean and pressed." Americana ran her hand along the waist of her Dior Venus dress, which hugged her body with perfect precision. But in that setting, the fabric felt far too heavy. There was something in the woman's gaze, as gentle as it was firm, that suggested refusing would be impolite. So she nodded with a smile and walked toward one of the rooms she had indicated. Americana stepped into the room. On the bed, a simple cotton dress with a light blue floral pattern had been folded neatly beside a pair of denim shorts and a t-shirt printed with fireworks in shades of red and silver. Everything looked new, as if freshly taken from a store window. Americana chose the lighter option, denim shorts and the printed t-shirt. Back in the living room, Astayam was seated in an armchair, having removed the outer part of his suit. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up to the elbows. He had loosened his tie and tucked it discreetly into his pocket. Nio appeared more relaxed. He had changed his entire outfit. He now wore a light blue shirt and gray trousers with impeccable brown shoes. Everything tailored to his singular frame. "Sweetheart, don't you want to change clothes?" the woman asked woey. "Nope," the girl replied, offering no further room for any kind of wardrobe suggestion. The woman smiled politely and said nothing more. Pappendackern was on the living room rug, playing with the children and the dog. The children opened his compartments and connected their electronic toys. The dog was still licking the plush panda's visor. Then it was announced, "Dinner is served. Come on in. The fireworks will be starting soon." The four of them followed in silence. The dining room was bright, lit by a curtainless window. The polished wooden floor reflected the soft golden glow of the hanging lamps. In the center stood a table surrounded by 6 distinct chairs, each one angled slightly inward, as if awaiting its guests. Wui took a seat in a tall chair with a firm backrest and metallic details on the arms. Americana hesitated for a moment, then settled into a light upholstered chair made of pale wood, its curves gently rounded. Estiam walked over to the most understated chair at the table. It was dark, simple, with straight lines. He pulled it out carefully and sat down. Nio observed, then chose a low, comfortable chair with wide arms. Then the woman entered carrying the dishes, her smile gentle. The man followed her, balancing platters, pitchers, and bowls. "We hope you enjoy it," said the woman, placing the final dish on the table. "We made it with care." The table was abundant. At the center, a platter held rare roasted meat covered in a thick, glossy sauce. Beside it, charred vegetables dusted with peppers. There was also a plate of warm salad with green leaves and red berries, a drizzle of honey trailing like liquid gold over the seeds. A dark risotto in a deep bowl gave off an earthy, intense aroma. The herbs were arranged like a symmetrical garden pattern. Further along, a ceramic cauldron kept a steaming stew of vegetables, roots, and grains immersed in a thick broth. "Please, help yourselves," said the man. Everything's still warm. Wui was the first to serve herself. Without hesitation, she chose the rare meat and roasted vegetables, pouring plenty of sauce on top. Americana was unsure, so she composed her plate with a fruit and leaf salad, decorating it with seeds. Estiam examined the risotto with care and served himself a portion. He picked up a spoon with a black handle and began to eat. Nio helped himself to the stew. He used the ladle with care, arranging the vegetables neatly in the deep plate and blowing on the steam, before beginning to eat. After the meal, the woman smiled and said with excitement, "Are you ready? Here comes the best part of the 4th of July." The man opened the front door and invited them. "The porch gives us an incredible view. Let's head outside." The group walked out to the veranda, now softly lit by the glow of neighboring houses. The lawn, still damp from the early night's dew, released a sweet green scent, mingling with the fragrance of freshly baked pie drifting in from the kitchen. The woman brought out thin, colorful blankets and handed one to each of them. Wui spread hers on the grass and lay down with her arms wide open. Her pink top hat became a shield against the stars. Estiam leaned against the porch railing, while Nio remained standing. Americana settled on the steps, adjusting the blanket over her legs. Pappendackern climbed into her lap, nestling into her arms like a sleepy child. Then the first fireworks split the sky. A golden flower of light stretched its tendrils into the night, followed by another in deep red. Blue cascades, green stars, silver spirals. The explosions unfolded like a visual symphony, vibrating in the chest, mirrored in the eyes. painting their faces with color. Papandakern activated recording mode and began filming the colorful night sky. The man embraced the woman around the waist. The children reappeared at the doorway, each holding a glowing colored wand. The dog wagged its tail, excited by the bursts in the sky. Then, a different sound rose above the fireworks symphony. A deep engine rumble, screeching tires. A sharp, abrupt brake. 2 black vans halted violently in front of the house. Their headlights swept across every corner. Doors burst open with a crash. Armed men, masked, wearing vests and carrying heavy weapons, leapt from the vehicles. "Hands in the air, police!" The shout tore through the night like thunder. The woman stepped forward, stunned. The man tried to make sense of it, but within seconds, they were both surrounded. The agents aimed their weapons with precision. One gave rapid commands using hand signals. Another approached and, without ceremony, forced the man to the ground. Handcuffs snapped into place. The woman was crying. She raised her wrists without resistance. The children screamed from the doorway. The dog barked furiously, trying to break free. One of the agents grabbed it by the neck and tied it to a porch pillar. "Clyde, my God!" The woman cried. The children. Papandakern activated a sequence of red lights. "Mommy, risk mode engaged." Hostility detected. Americana pressed the robot tightly against her chest. Wooey, startled, flipped across the lawn and landed on her feet. Nayo instinctively extended his body in front of the children, shielding them from any potential impact. Astayam remained still, as if the sudden shift in scene had frozen him in place. His face was a mask of clinical observation. One of the officers shouted, "You there! Come with us. You are direct witnesses." The street, moments earlier alive with fireworks, was now wrapped in a strange silence. Windows opened. Neighbors appeared like silhouettes, watching without understanding. Lights burst in the sky, colorful but irrelevant, as if the celebration had carried on, forgetting what was happening below. They were all taken to the precinct. Upon arrival, they were separated. Papandakern tried to hold Americana's hand, but one of the officers pulled him by his plush arm and said, "You're going with her." Technical unit. Americana followed the robot without saying a word. Wooey was taken to a different room. Astayam accepted every command in silence, never questioning any order given by the agents. Nayao seemed to scan the entire environment with calculated coldness. His gaze moved steadily, alert to every detail: the cameras, the glasses on the counter, the faint tremble in the officer's thumb as he filled out the forms. They were left alone for a while, long enough for the sound of their own thoughts to become unsettling. Then they were brought back together. An officer entered, carrying a folder, thick, worn at the edges. She placed it on a metal table and opened it. Inside were 2 laminated sheets. One displayed the photo of the man who had welcomed them. The other, the woman who had been loving, kind, and gracious to them all. Without ceremony, the officer pointed with her index finger and said to Wooey, "Astayam, Nayo, and Americana, you spent the day at the home of Bonnie Elizabeth Parker." She turned to the next sheet. "And Clyde Chestnut Barrel." Wooey clicked her tongue and said, "You're telling us we were in the house of Bonnie and Clyde?" Astayam leaned his face forward, analyzing. "They're real. Or, I don't understand." The officer said nothing. She pulled out a small tablet and, with a gesture, showed them a video captured by a security camera. Footage of the couple entering an official building, followed by abrupt cuts, muffled gunshots, an alarm blaring, a body on the floor. Then, clippings from digital newspapers, headlines, official statements. Global mourning. Finally, a frozen image of the victim appeared on screen. A man in a dark gray suit, smiling beside his pregnant wife. A caption beneath read, United Nations Secretary General shot dead. Silence fell over the room. The officer stepped back from the table. Another agent entered, carrying a blue folder, then announced, "The first hearing will begin now. We need all 4 of you to give your statements as witnesses. We also need to examine the robot, in case there is recorded footage or any clear evidence." Nio stood up. They seemed normal, loving, with their own children. "With us," added Americana. "They welcomed us. Not for a single moment did they seem dangerous," murmured Estiam. "That's the thing," said Wooey, crossing her arms. "Maybe it's exactly because they seemed so perfect that they were the most dangerous." A third agent handed over documents to be signed. 4 different pens were placed on the metal table. Without any instruction, each of them chose one. As they signed, the precinct's camera recorded them discreetly from above, and far from there, in the canopy of the tree of knowledge, the patrons, directors, masters, and scholars were watching everything. The courtroom was wide and austere. Marble statues lined the central aisle. A United Nations flag rested imposingly behind the judge's chair. At the center, the defense and prosecution tables, and 4 chairs for the witnesses. Americana, Wooey, Estiam, and Nio. Papandakern was escorted by 2 technicians in white lab coats to an adjacent room. His plush body was plugged into a forensic terminal. Wooey was called first. She stood with resolve, gave her pink Victorian skirt a sharp tug, lifted her chin, and walked to the bench. She did not remove her top hat. She sat without permission, crossed her legs, looked straight at the prosecutor. "Miss Helk, how would you describe the time spent in the house with the couple?" "Simple. They were friendly, welcoming, and honestly so perfect it was weird. That always bothers me. People who smile too much or try too hard to please are hiding something." "Are you saying you were suspicious of them?" "No. I'm saying I don't fall for smiles. That's all." "Did they show any aggressive behavior?" "Not at all. But the way they treated me like some spoiled, rich little girl." "That's already a kind of violence, isn't it?" There was a murmur in the room. Wooey stepped down without waiting to be dismissed. Americana was called next. She rose slowly, somewhat hesitant. She walked to the chair as if stepping onto a live recording set. Before sitting, she looked at everyone, then at the judge as if awaiting direction. "You may sit, Miss Del Silva." Americana nodded with a faint smile and seated herself gently. She kept her large eyes wide open, studying every face in the room. "How were you received by the couple?" "Warmly. The food was good. They were kind. The children were lovely, and I felt like we were part of a commercial. Only later did I think it might have been a disguise. But at the time, it just felt like a real home." "Are you saying you had no suspicions?" "I'm saying I let myself be moved by the moment. I observed. I recorded everything up here." She pointed to her head. "But I felt it here too." She pointed to her chest. The judge raised an eyebrow. Americana thanked them and returned to her seat. Estiam was called. He sprayed his nasal mist, then rose with precision, like someone who knows exactly how many seconds to spend between the bench and the pulpit. He sat with a straight posture, hands folded on the table, eyes steady. "Mr. Deekwoden, did you observe anything out of the ordinary?" "That depends. What kind of ordinary are we talking about? Biological? Behavioral? Psychological? Because if it's behavior, the couple was exemplary. Excessively so. Are you suggesting they were pretending?" "Not suggesting. Stating it as a likely hypothesis. The woman served dinner as if she were on stage. The man used standardized expressions of hospitality, and neither corrected the children, even when they shouted. It was all staged and well. But you still stayed in the house?" "Stayed to observe." I never draw conclusions before testing the environment. Estime sprayed the nasal mist again. Nio was the last. He rose calmly, adjusting his collar, then the hem of his coat. He gave a slight bow to the judge before walking forward. He sat down slowly, settling into the chair. He coughed, cleared his throat, and took a sip of his syrup. Mr. Nemesis, how was your experience? They treated us with dignity. They served everyone equally, shared food, blankets, and time. The children looked at us with trust. The dog wagged its tail. And you saw no sign of disguise? I saw signs of humanity. And that is always confusing. Even now, I'm not sure if they were monsters or martyrs. But I believe even a murderer can have a moment of truth. The silence in the room grew heavy. Nio stood only after the judge gave a nod. Poppendaken's forensic analysis continued in secrecy, with technicians trying to extract any useful footage from his sensors. The judge cleared his throat gently, leaning forward on the elevated bench. The prosecution may proceed with the case file. We are ready to hear the opening statement. The prosecutor, a man of austere appearance, gray hair, and a voice trained in rhetoric, rose with the deliberate slowness of someone who commands the rhythm of the courtroom. Your Honor, members of the jury, and of course, the witnesses. He cast a brief glance at the four seated side by side and at the plush robot under technical examination in the corner of the room. What appeared to be a holiday welcome dinner was, in fact, part of a carefully orchestrated criminal strategy. The courtroom fell completely silent. The accused, Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow, are guilty of premeditated murder. The victim, the Secretary General of the United Nations. The crime took place the night before their encounter with the four young individuals present here today. The impact was immediate. A murmur moved through the room like a restrained wave. The judge struck the gavel once, calling for silence with a stern gaze. The prosecutor lifted a black folder, opened it, and pulled out several copies of a dossier. After the crime, the accused relocated to a suburban residence, altered their digital records, and brought with them 2 children, presumably their own, and a dog, as a way to simulate a traditional family life and hide in plain sight, right in the middle of a national holiday. The prosecutor took a few steps across the platform. The 4 young individuals present here, whose identities are still under evaluation, were welcomed by the couple with apparent generosity. But we now know, through surveillance records and cross-reference data from the border, that this hospitality was part of a staged performance. The prosecutor gestured slowly, deliberately. The presence of strangers in the house would serve as the perfect smokescreen. A typical home, with cheerful guests on Independence Day, a strategy of normality to conceal a heinous crime. Another heavy silence followed, thick with glances. We reiterate that, as far as we know, the young individuals and the robot were unaware of the defendant's past. But their presence in that house, even if accidental, turned them into key witnesses in understanding the stage crafted by the accused. The prosecutor turned to the judge. Therefore, Your Honor, we request that the next phase of this hearing involve the analysis of the technical contents of the robot named Poppendaken, who, according to prior documentation, is equipped with audio and video recording, as well as environmental sensors. We request immediate forensic examination to validate the contents of its memory. The judge nodded lightly and addressed the forensic team. Authorized. Proceed with the analysis. From the corner of the room, 2 human technicians and a technical drone moved forward to connect Poppendaken to the system. The judge then signaled for everyone to prepare for a recess. We will take a brief break while the data is processed. After that, we will hear the defense. This session is adjourned for 15 minutes. The 4 were taken to a waiting room, along with Poppendaken, who looked around from side to side. 15 minutes later, the sound of the judge's gavel echoed once more. cutting through the murmurs of the audience. "Session resumed," he declared firmly, straightening in his chair. "As promised, we will now hear from the defense." The defense attorney stood, organizing her papers with surgical slowness. She was preparing to speak when the side door opened with a sharp sound. A young man in a light gray suit entered the courtroom in haste. His hair was meticulously combed, and he carried a beige folder marked with a blue seal, closed with a small wax stamp engraved, with a symbol that only the most learned would recognize at first glance: the covert crest of the Global Biogenetic Archives Division, a secret agency within the United Nations. The young man crossed the room to the defense bench. He leaned in, whispered something into the attorney's ear, and handed her the folder with trembling hands, as if delivering a dangerous artifact. The attorney turned pale. With tense discretion, she opened the folder. Her eyes moved quickly over the first pages and slowly lifted toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said, her voice sounding as though it had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "We have a most serious development, one that changes absolutely the entire structure of this case." The judge sighed with impatience. "Please explain." The attorney raised the folder with both hands. "I request permission to deliver this dossier to you, to the prosecution, and also to the witnesses involved." The judge nodded. A court officer collected copies and distributed them to the bench, the prosecution, and the witnesses. Americana, Wooey, Astium, and Nio opened the folder slowly. At the top of the first document, it read, "Biomorphology File, HCl001, Classification, Highly Confidential, Subject, SGU Inclone A HU1939, Civilian Name, Adolf Heinrich, Public Codename, Jean-Claude Lemire, Position, Secretary General of the United Nations, 2022 to 2024, Origin, Cloning Project terminated in 1992, reactivated under undisclosed funding in 2005. Nio said nothing. Estung was the first to rise and step forward, checking to make sure he hadn't misread. "My God," he whispered, without a hint of irony. "It's a clone. He's actually a clone of Adolf Hitler." Americana covered her mouth with both hands, while Wooey let out a dry, disbelieving laugh. The prosecution stood, visibly shaken. "This is unacceptable," the prosecutor shouted. "This is a forgery, or a desperate attempt to manipulate the jury. Where is the proof? The genetic documentation?" The attorney had anticipated this. "The genetic samples have already been authenticated by the United Nations' own biogenetic division. And more than that, a hidden apartment registered under the Secretary General's name was discovered. It contained Nazi symbols, NATO strategic maps, records of population experimentation, and a modernized version of the so-called Mein Kampf." The courtroom erupted into deafening murmurs. The judge had to strike the gavel multiple times to restore order. "Order! Order in this court! We will examine all the evidence." He gestured to the clerk. "Call the technician responsible for the analysis of the robot present at the scene," he ordered. A middle-aged man in a white lab coat, wearing thick-lensed glasses, rose from the front row and stepped forward, carrying a transparent tablet. "Your Honor, as requested, the real-time forensic analysis of the Poppendakern device has been completed. The unit is equipped with high-precision visual, auditory, and olfactory sensors. Additionally, it automatically stores all data collected in the last 72 hours. "And what did you find?" asked the judge. The technician slid his finger across the screen. The recordings confirmed that the robot was present during the dinner, the police raid, and the transport to the precinct. Most importantly, it captured the arrival of the 4 young individuals on the lawn, before any interaction with the couple. All visual and audio data corroborate the witness statements given thus far. Is there any footage prior to the group's arrival? Negative, Your Honor. The first frame showing the couple occurs after the alleged day of the crime. Therefore, there is no indication of direct involvement by the four individuals in the death of the Secretary General. The judge adjusted his glasses and said, "Let it be noted that the robot is now considered a key piece of evidence in this trial." He adjusted his glasses again. There was a new weight in his expression. He looked at the prosecution, then at the defense, and finally at the four young witnesses. In light of the magnitude of this case and the evidence revealed in this session, I hereby declare the current hearing suspended indefinitely. This trial has surpassed the jurisdiction of this district court and must now be deliberated by a higher body, composed of federal representatives, members of the Supreme Court, and the International Law Commission of the United Nations. A collective murmur rose in the room. The defense attorney stood, visibly surprised. "Your Honor, does this mean the defendants will be transferred?" "No," he replied firmly. "The accused will remain in custody until the new legal body decides how to proceed. The integrity of the four witness statements, as well as the data recorded by the robot, will be submitted for review by the panel that is being formed." The judge turned to the officers. "Arrange secure transport. The young individuals and the automaton are to be transferred to a restricted ward, where they will remain under confidentiality and protection." The four looked at one another. A suspended silence settled in the air. "This session is adjourned," said the judge, striking the wooden block. Americana, Wooey, Astium, Nio, and Papandakarn were escorted in a black van to a restricted ward. They arrived at the restricted ward. It resembled a hotel room. They were placed in a spacious chamber with no windows, furnished with 4 beds and an oval table at the center. Waiting on the table was a white box filled with fruit and a note. "Do not leave the room. Committee of Legal Ethics." Americana sat in the corner with a sigh. Wooey paced back and forth, spinning her top hat on one finger. Astium studied the details of the fruit box, checking the expiration date on each item. Nio examined the structure of the room, searching for hidden cameras. "What do you think is going to happen now?" asked Americana. "This is all theater," said Wooey bluntly. "I don't like any of it. They're trying to manipulate us." "Please stay calm," murmured Nio. "Let's focus on the facts. None of us have been arrested. We're still together. For now," Astium muttered, without lifting his eyes from the apple he was inspecting. "But we could be the next to disappear if we say the wrong thing to the wrong person. What you're not seeing is that this is already a test. All of it, the chairs, the plates, the detention. Now this room. They want to see how long it takes before we crack." Silence settled over the room. "Well, if this is a test, I'm ready," said Wooey, staring at the group with resolve. "I have my opinions. I don't care if they think I'm bossy. Better to be bossy than sit there shaking. And I'll speak the way I know how," said Americana. "I'm not going to force anyone to think like me. But I can show what I felt. What I lived. Feeling doesn't solve anything," Astium cut in. "People need to reason. Look at the facts. Interpret the data. Emotion is a trap, and reason alone is arrogance," Nio replied. "I prefer to listen first. Then I speak." Hours passed. It was impossible to tell whether it was day or night. The room they were in, spacious and windowless, wrapped them in a dense silence, broken only by the occasional conversation. Without any warning, the door opened. 2 agents in dark suits, with earpiece communicators, stepped into the room. One of them spoke firmly. "Come with us. The hearing has been rescheduled. The counsel is waiting, without room for questions." The group consisting of Americana, Wooey, Astium, Nio, and Papandakarn was escorted along a long route. They entered the black van once again. which followed discreet streets, silent tunnels, and passed through several layers of security. They stopped in front of a building. Inside, they walked through long corridors until they were brought into a hearing chamber. At the center stood a curved bench with 4 elevated seats. Seated there were 4 judges, 3 men and 1 woman, representing the High Legal Council. In front of the bench, a light wooden podium marked the place where Americana, Wui, Astium, and Nio were instructed to stand. One of the judges, with a deep voice and a direct gaze, spoke. This council has been assembled under extraordinary circumstances to deliberate on the developments regarding the former Secretary General. He paused briefly, as if weighing his words. The 4 of you, along with the robot, were the only ones present in the moments following the crime of assassination. Your actions have been recorded, assessed, and reviewed across multiple levels. And it is the consensus of this council that the 4 of you now represent not only witnesses, but legitimate voices of civil society. He leaned forward slightly. Given the severity of the facts, including the unprecedented case of a clone with plans capable of causing global harm, and considering his death at the hands of 2 civilians, this court hereby elevates the status of the defendants to a trial by popular jury. Every citizen of the United States will be called upon to vote, expressing their judgment on the conviction or acquittal of Bonnie and Clyde. Another silence followed. To that end, this council orders that the 4 young individuals, the sole witnesses to the events following the crime, deliver public statements using the social platforms of their choosing. Their analyses, their words, and their interpretations will be made public as an essential part of the deliberation process. He paused for longer this time. His gaze moved across the group. The final decision of society will, in part, be shaped by your voices. A slight nod of the head came before the conclusion. The interview room is being prepared. Each of you will have individual access to the defendants before issuing your statement to the public. Journalistic broadcast, Channel N8. Good evening. We now begin this special edition of N8 with full coverage of the case that has shaken global public opinion, announced anchor Miriam Coast, her expression grave. The murder of one of the most influential men on the planet, who at the time served as Secretary General of the UN, revealed a web of secrets, genetic manipulations, and a clandestine cloning network that extended deep into the upper ranks of international diplomacy, added journalist Arthur Dale, seated beside her. The man the world knew as Jean-Claude Lemire was, in fact, a clone of Adolf Hitler, created in a laboratory through state-of-the-art genetic engineering. His birth name, Adolf Heinrich. The information was confirmed by documents leaked earlier this week. Heinrich had been legally registered with a civilian identity and had held the highest office at the UN for 3 years. His charisma and geopolitical influence were instrumental in the implementation of global measures on arms control, governmental digitalization, and migration regulation, said Miriam, as archival footage played showing Lemire speaking at the UN. Investigations revealed that, in his apartment, detailed plans were discovered for the establishment of a new global regime, including documents classified as Mein Kampf 2.0, along with evidence of coordinated efforts with heads of state to alter democratic structures from within. Arthur added, the crime took place only moments ago. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow, a civilian couple previously unknown to the public, invaded Heinrich's apartment and executed him with 2 gunshots. The motive? Still not officially confirmed, though rumors suggest the couple had prior access to the clone's hidden archives. After the crime, Bonnie and Clyde did not flee the country. On the contrary, they quietly moved to a suburban neighborhood with their 2 young children. There, they took in 4 teenagers and a robot, who remained with them following the act. The robot, an advanced piece of educational interface technology, recorded the moments immediately following the crime, although it did not witness the assassination itself. The contents of its memory were retrieved by the authorities. The footage reveals interactions with the teenagers and informal conversations between them and the couple. And now, for the first time in history, the case will be submitted to public jury through social media. That's right. Every citizen will have the chance to participate in the verdict. But before that, the teenagers will be the first to speak, concluded Arthur. The screen changed. Now, in front of the main UN building, reporter Janine Rowe appeared live. Miriam, Arthur, good evening. I'm here in front of the UN headquarters, where Jean-Claude Lemire used to deliver his speeches. The four teenagers, Americana del Silva, Woi Helg, Sebastian Zeki Geekwoden, and Nio Nemesis, will be the first civilians to have direct access to the defendants. They were chosen because they were with the couple on the day following the crime. Each of them will be heard individually, and afterward, each one must deliver a public statement through social media, platforms such as TikTok, WhatsApp, X, YouTube, or Instagram. The public will then be invited to watch the broadcasts and vote either for the conviction or acquittal of Bonnie and Clyde. The result of this popular vote will directly influence the final verdict. As we reported earlier, the N8 team gained exclusive access to the laboratories and scientists involved in the cloning of Heinrich. The investigation points to a confidential project that began back in the 1990s, using cells extracted from historical artifacts, including hair, fabric, and fluids preserved by descendants of Third Reich leaders. The scientists, speaking under anonymity, stated they were paid in digital currency and forced to work under secrecy protocols enforced with threats of death. The goal of the project was to create a new world leader based on Hitler's genetic material, but raised from childhood to appear as a social benefactor. Heinrich, or Lemire, had a wife and children, and his wife is currently 8 months pregnant. The family has been placed under diplomatic protection and will not issue any statements. The international community remains divided between shock, disbelief, and conspiracy theories. The case raises ethical, religious, political, and technological questions. After all, who authorized the creation of Adolf Heinrich? And why? We now return to the studio with Miriam and Arthur for further details. Janine Rowe, reporting live from UN headquarters. Channel N8. The camera returned to the studio. Miriam Coast appeared with a firm expression. Thank you, Janine. We return to the studio to clarify the next steps in this unprecedented process that is mobilizing both the nation and the world. Arthur Dale continued. From this moment forward, citizens should stay tuned to the official social media platforms. That's because the four teenagers and the robot who were with Bonnie and Clyde on the day after the assassination will soon make their public statements. Before that, each of them will undergo an individual interview with the defendants, mediated by authorities and fully recorded. These interviews, however, will not be released to the public. Only the final statements of the teenagers will be made public, Miriam added. These statements will be delivered through each of their personal social media accounts. The teenager Americana del Silva will use TikTok and WhatsApp, as she has done since the beginning of the case. Woi Helg has chosen X, formerly Twitter, as his platform. Sebastian Zeki Geekwoden will speak through YouTube, and Nio Nemesis through Instagram and Facebook, explained Arthur, as images of the teenagers were shown. Miriam continued. Once these statements are made public, it will be up to the population to decide. Though no date has been confirmed, the upper echelon of the American judicial system has stated that there will be an official national summons. All citizens of the United States will be required to vote. The objective, to decide on the acquittal or conviction of Bonnie and Clyde, The individuals responsible for the assassination of Adolf Heinrich, the man who, until just a few days ago, was known internationally as Jean-Claude Lemire, Secretary General of the United Nations. Arthur concluded, this unprecedented process seeks to balance formal justice, civil responsibility, and public participation in the face of a crime that may redefine the foundations of institutional trust on a global scale. Miriam nodded. We will be following every step, and you at home will be a central part of this story. Good night. Live TikTok at Americana.codes, 2.4 meters watching. The camera opens on Americana, holding the phone vertically. Her face is partially lit by a side window. She doesn't speak immediately. The silence is tense. In the background, a faint hum of the air conditioner can be heard. Americana. Hi. She swallows hard. Her voice is calm, but carries tension. I'm here. Inside the building. The building. Poppendackern jumps in front of the camera, bouncing and waving. Poppendackern. Hi. It's me, Papa. We're in a place that smells like wet shoes and bitter coffee. Americana gently moves him aside with her hand, without taking her eyes off the camera. Americana. You can't play here, Papa. The camera turns slowly. The phone shows a long white corridor with blue signs and an N, American flag, placed beside a door labeled Interview Room 03 U.S. Doge. A black-suited agent walks by in silence. Americana, softly. This is the room. Bonnie's room. She takes a deep breath. I'm going in. Poppendackern whispers loudly in the background. Poppendackern. Do you think she's gonna cry? I cry when I get nervous. The camera returns to Americana's face. She tries to smile, but the smile doesn't fully form. Americana, if you want more people to see this, share it. Send it on WhatsApp. I mean it. Some people aren't on TikTok. This matters now. 2 guards appear in the background. A handcuffed woman is brought in by the arm. Bonnie. Messy hair. Serene expression. Americana, looking straight at the camera. I'll be back soon. She taps the screen. The live stream ends. Live X Twitter at WWWYYEH. 912.8K watching. The stream begins with the front camera already in place. Wooey is seated in a swivel chair, legs crossed. In the room, gray walls, a metallic table between her and an empty chair. A mirrored observation window takes up the back wall. Cold lighting? Wooey. You really thought I was going to stay outside waiting? Never? She snaps her fingers slowly, then applies lip gloss. Picks up a small bottle of lavender tea and takes a sip. Wooey. Good morning, or I don't know. Good luck. I was assigned to interview Clyde. She looks directly at the camera. The man. The myth. The murderer? She makes air quotes with her fingers, then smiles like someone cracking a joke at a funeral. Pinned comment. At Zillionaire. That room's colder than your heart. Princess. She reads it, lets out a laugh, and replies. Wooey. Thank you. Quite the compliment. She leans her face toward the camera, resting her chin on her hand. Wooey. For those who don't know, I'm one of the 4 witnesses who lived with the couple after the event. She spins slowly in the chair, visibly bored, and before anyone says, but you're just a spoiled girl. Well, that's true. But I'm also someone who was there. So, deal with it. Someone knocks at the door. The doorknob turns. She stops spinning, wooey, in a more serious tone. This is it. 2 officers enter with Clyde in handcuffs. His head is down, eyes hollow, unshaven. They seat him in the opposite chair, wooey, raising an eyebrow. Doctors and darlings. I'm going to have to end the stream now. This conversation's going to be delicious. She ends the live with a crooked smile. Live YouTube. Channel, STIMZ Geekwoden. 203,117 watching live. The camera is set on a portable tripod. STIM stands in the detention center hallway. Neutral walls, frosted windows, guards in the background. He wears a button-up shirt fastened to the collar. His expression is serious. STIM, firm voice, documentary tone, visual record. My name is Sebastian Zeki Geekwoden, and this is my official transmission. He tilts the camera slightly, revealing in the background a steel door with a mirrored viewing panel. Above it, a glowing sign reads, Room 4 Controlled Interview, STIM. Behind that door, Bonnie Parker, one of the people responsible for the death of the former Secretary General of the United Nations, also known as Jean-Claude Lemire. But you already know the rest. What you didn't see is what happened after, when they vanished off the radar. And we four found them. He looks directly into the camera again. STIM, I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here because I was summoned. By chance or by statistics. Doesn't matter. Inside that room, I will look into the eyes of the woman who killed or freed the world from a monster. And I will listen. Just listen. He moves calmly. The camera shakes slightly as he picks it back up. Then he opens the door. Interior angle of the room. The light is bluish. A table at the center. A chair on one side. The other, empty. A closed paper folder rests in front of STIM. He sits down, positions the camera on the edge of the table. STIM, softer. It's my turn. Pause. I'll be back when it's over. A guard appears in the background with Bonnie in handcuffs. The camera goes dark as his hand covers the lens. Stream ended. Live Instagram, Facebook. Account at nio.nemmes is 42,314 watching live. Stream also shared on Facebook. The camera is already positioned at a frontal angle. Nio is seated on a simple chair inside a bright and stuffy room. There is a metal table between him and the opposite chair, still empty. Nio, looking at the camera, hesitant. Hi. I think it's already live. Clears throat and coughs. Yeah. I'm here. In the room where I'll talk to Clyde. He wipes his forehead, visibly nervous. Smiles faintly. Nio. For those who don't know me, I'm Nio. Just Nio Nemesis. I was one of the last people to see Bonnie and Clyde before they were taken by the authorities. He looks at the folder on the table, but doesn't open it. Nio, I didn't come here to accuse or to defend. I came to listen. That's it. To listen to what he has to say, and then tell you with the right words. Because that's what we need right now, isn't it? The right words. Sound of approaching footsteps. Nio looks to the side. The door opens. An agent enters with Clyde in handcuffs. He looks calm. He gazes at Nio with an expression that is strangely fraternal. Nio, in a softer voice. It's time. I'm going to end this now, but I'll be back later. Okay? To tell you everything. He reaches for the phone, and the video fades out. Stream ended. Live now at a MERIC-ANA_real TikTok forward via WhatsApp. The video begins with the front camera shaking slightly, then stabilizing. The image reveals Americana with a serious but calm expression. She is sitting on a bench outside the building where the interviews took place. America-NA. Hi, everyone. I know you're all waiting for answers. And I promised I'd come back to tell you. So here I am. Short pause. She looks at the screen, takes a deep breath. I just left the interrogation room with Bonnie. And yes, that Bonnie, the woman at the center of this entire story. Papendackern appears in the corner of the screen, holding a cup of juice, shakes it slightly as if offering it to her, and says, Do you want something to drink before you talk to the whole world? Americana gently strokes Poppendaken's head. No, sweetheart. Stay here with me. She turns her gaze back to the camera. I walked into that room expecting to meet a murderer. That's what we've been told so far, right? But what I found was a woman who looked me in the eyes with a pain that didn't seem fake. And I know I'm just a teenager, an immigrant who lived in Malibu, chosen by a bizarre app that changed my life. But I felt that what she told me wasn't a lie. Short pause. Poppendakarn plays with the camera, making rainbow filters appear on screen. Americana pushes him gently aside. Bonnie told me she killed a monster, but no one would believe it because the monster didn't have fangs or tentacles. He wore a suit. He had speeches. He had a title. He had popularity. His name was Jean-Claude Lemire, but his DNA said something else. Adolf Heinrich. And before she said a word to me, Bonnie showed me photos, videos, a book with plans for population control, networks of global manipulation, and documents that described how he would become the new Reich. All signed, all stored in a luxury apartment, the one they broke into themselves. She swallows hard, staring into the camera. I know you're waiting for me to say, Bonnie is a hero, or Bonnie is a criminal. But the truth, to me, is more complex than that. She told me that what she did out of fear of what the world would become if that man wasn't stopped. And more than fear, she seemed to feel shame. Shame for having carried her own mistake in her arms, because she knew that, by killing a clone, she was also killing a question. Could he have changed? I'm not here to say vote this way or vote that way. My message is, pay attention to what was done, but also to why it was done. This wasn't a regular case. This wasn't just another murder. It was a judgment of the past, standing before the future. She sighs and takes the phone in both hands. If you think this matters, if you believe your aunt, your grandfather, your classmates need to hear this, send this video on WhatsApp. I don't have millions of followers, but I do have the truth I heard with my own ears. And my truth is that Bonnie seemed more human to me than the man she killed. She ends with a choked voice. May God help us choose wisely. The live ends with a blurred image of Poppendakarn saying, "Where is everybody? Is it over already?" Video posted at WWYYE_real deal. X, Twitter. Duration, 1min29s. Vertical vlog aesthetic. Fast-paced editing with hard cuts and manual zooms. Auto captions enabled. The video begins with a crooked shot of the interrogation room sign. Immediately after, Wee spins the camera toward herself. Her expression is sarcastic, and her neon pink lipstick is flawless. WWYY. Guys, I walked into that room thinking I'd find a terrorist. What I found was a man with the soul of a war tank, but the voice of someone who slept on cold floors, afraid of waking up to a world that hasn't changed at all. Cut. The footage shakes. It shows the building corridor with soldiers walking in the background. This Clyde guy, he doesn't cry. He doesn't shout. He doesn't try to justify anything. He just looks. And let me tell you, his gaze weighs more than any sentence ever could. Cut to her inside the room, holding the camera close to her face. He told me he'd never killed anyone before. Said that when Bonnie made the decision, they both hesitated. But when he saw who the Secretary General really was, when he saw what that man in a suit was keeping at home, he said, if I don't do this now, who's going to do it when it's already too late? Zoom on her face, now serious. I asked him, do you regret it? And he answered with just one sentence. I regret letting Bonnie go first. Cut. She's now outside the building at sunset. The camera is low, and her face appears backlit. So that's it, United States of America. Clyde killed a clone of Adolf Hitler. A clone with plans to destroy the world, but plans that hadn't been carried out yet. He killed what might have been. And now we have to decide whether that makes him a hero or a preemptive murderer. Final frame with white text over a black background. RT if you would vote for acquittal. Quote if you would vote for conviction. The world is watching. And so am I. XX Wooey. YouTube video posted. Channel. Estayam Zeki Geekwoden. Title. If you were in her place, what would you do? Duration. 9min22s. Cinematic style. Intimate tone. Black and white. Image with flashes of color. Only on Bonnie's face and Estayam's hands. Static camera. Soft lighting. Complete focus on the words. The video begins with Estayam sitting in front of the camera. Behind him, a gray wall with map sketches and stacked books. He looks directly at the viewer. Takes a deep breath. Estayam. Today, I walked into a room. Across from me sat a handcuffed woman. Her name is Bonnie Elizabeth Parker. But that's not what I saw. Long pause. A soft melody begins to play in the background. What I saw was a soul with hairline fractures, built up over decades or generations perhaps. She didn't try to convince me of anything. Not once. And that was what moved me the most. She simply told her story, like someone confessing in front of a mirror. Cut to a symbolic image, a window with sunlight streaming in, a handheld shot of Estayam adjusting the microphone, the camera shaking slightly. She said she grew up hearing stories about the Holocaust, that her great-grandmother escaped from a train, that her grandfather had numbers inked into his arm, and that when she saw the Secretary General of the UN, that elegant, calm, influential man, she felt a chill down her spine, not because of who he was, but because of what he carried inside. I asked her if she was sure, if there wasn't any chance of redemption. She answered, "Can you redeem a ghost? Can you talk to the echo of a genocidal mind and expect it to change its opinion?" Slow cut. Black screen with white letters. Jean-Claude Lemire equals Adolf Heinrich equals Adolf Hitler 2.0. Bonnie didn't cry. She simply held the gaze. And for a moment, I saw someone who didn't want to kill, but couldn't let him live, return to Estayam in silence. Then he continues, "I didn't come here to ask for your opinion. I came to remind you that you have one, and soon you'll have to use it. In a country that keeps asking for justice, sometimes it comes from unexpected hands. Sometimes it comes in the form of Bonnie. And it's up to you to decide whether that's justice or just another crime among many." He turns off the camera. At the end, a title screen appears. Voting will begin soon. Watch, reflect, and vote with whatever remains human inside you. Estayam. Video post. Instagram and Facebook of Nio Nemesis. Format. Vertical soft image with warm tones. Instrumental music in the background. Cello and piano. The video begins with Nio seated on a wooden bench in a small indoor garden, next to a tree. He holds the phone with the front camera activated. A golden filter gently overlays the screen. He takes a deep breath, looking intently. Nio. Hello, everyone. I'm Nio Nemesis. And today I met a man named Clyde. Brief pause. He swallows hard, coughs, takes a sip of his syrup. I admit that when they told me he was involved in the assassination of a UN secretary, even if he was a clone, my mind got caught in 1,000 judgments. But I went. I looked into his eyes. Brief silence. Cut to footage of Clyde entering the room in handcuffs. And I saw fear. But not the kind of fear that comes from someone afraid of being punished. It was the fear of being erased entirely from history. Clyde told me about the escape, Told me how he and Bonnie discovered the truth. Told me it wasn't the first time that man changed his name or his face. Slow footage of fictional paperwork on Jean-Claude Lemire. Torn fragments of documents. He said to me, "What would you do, Nio, if you found out that Hitler had come back, that he's alive, talking to world leaders, and has an entire book filled with plans to take over the world again?" And I didn't know how to answer. Because I don't know. I'm not a hero. I'm not a judge. I'm just someone who wants to understand and protect what can still be saved. I'm not here to say whether Clyde should be acquitted, but I am here to say that he was afraid for the world. And fear can be cruel, but sometimes it's the beginning of love. Nio breathes, visibly moved. Did he do the right thing? I don't know. Is he a murderer or a martyr? I don't know that either. But I know he treated me with dignity. And I know that, in that room, he seemed more human than many free men. The video nears its end. The screen grows slightly blurred. And soon all of us will have to vote. And before you vote, you need to feel. If you only think, you'll get it wrong. Fade out, vote as if your vote could save a life. Because it can. Nio Nemesis. Leave broadcast, news journal. Intro sequence with the animated logo of the network. Bottom headline. International crisis. Cloning, murder, and popular vote. Cuts to the studio. Two journalists side by side. An older man in a dark blue suit and a middle-aged woman with her hair tied back and a sullen expression. Behind them, large screens display overlapping images of Jean-Claude Lemire, Bonnie and Clyde, and the UN symbol. Anchor 1 male. Good evening. The case that shook. The world has just taken another step toward one of the most unexpected moments in modern history. If you're watching us, stay alert. Anchor 2, female. A few weeks ago, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Jean-Claude Lemire, was assassinated. The world came to a halt. But what at first seemed like an ordinary crime turned out to be a far more complex conspiracy. Anchor 1. The main suspects are Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow, a middle-class American couple, parents of 2 children and residents of a quiet suburb. The arrest occurred after an anonymous tip and videos that circulated on social media. Anchor 2. The major turning point came afterward. Investigators discovered that Jean-Claude Lemire, the Secretary General of the UN, was not who he claimed to be. His real name, Adolf Heinrich. His origin, the result of a clandestine cloning process based on Adolf Hitler's genetic material. Images on the screen, official documents, blurred photos from medical archives, the cover of the book found in the clone's apartment. Anchor 1. The secretary's apartment concealed a true ideological laboratory. Manuscripts, audio recordings, and handwritten drafts pointed to a mid-term global domination plan, including attempts to manipulate elections and control diplomatic networks. Anchor 2. The most unsettling detail. Adolf Heinrich led a seemingly peaceful life. Married, a father, and with his wife currently pregnant. The question that quickly emerged in the public sphere was immediate. Was he a future threat or a new version of an old nightmare? Anchor 1. Given the complexity of the case, the High Judicial Council of the United States, with support from the UN, authorized an unprecedented measure. The active participation of 4 teenagers, along with 1 advanced intelligence robot who had direct contact with the couple after the crime. Anchor 2. The 4 were the only living witnesses who were with Bonnie and Clyde immediately after the assassination. They were taken in by the couple, stayed in the same house, ate at the same table. For that reason, legal permission was granted for each of the teenagers to interview the defendants individually. Anchor 1. The interviews took place just moments ago. And now, we go live to the front of the United Nations headquarters, where our special correspondent, Natalie Romero, is standing by with more details. Cut to the reporter. In the background, the UN headquarters in New York, with flags waving and a small group of journalists gathered. Reporter, Natalie Romero. Good evening. The activity here has been intense since the early hours. The 4 teenagers, accompanied by their robot Papandakarn, arrived at the federal building under heavy escort. They were taken to isolated rooms, where each of them was able to interview the defendants, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, separately. The conversations took place in a controlled environment, with full audiovisual monitoring and the supervision of legal authorities. After the interviews, all 4 teenagers shared their impressions of the defendants on their respective social media accounts. They spoke in a spontaneous, direct, and emotional manner, revealing the personal impact of each encounter. Cut to silent footage of the broadcasts. Americana's TikTok, Astayam's YouTube, Wui's X, and Nayo's Instagram. Reporter. The stage of interviews and public statements has now been completed. It is now up to the American people to reflect and decide. Cut back to the studio. Anchor 2. And for those wondering what happens next, all citizens of the United States should prepare to vote. The vote will be decisive and will take place soon. Anchor 1. Each person will cast 2 votes. One to decide whether Bonnie should be acquitted or not, and another for Clyde. Anchor 2. The recommendation from authorities is clear. Follow the statements made by the 4 teenagers and reflect. They were the only living witnesses with direct access to the couple after the crime. And this extraordinary authorization was granted solely because of the unique position they occupied in this case. Anchor 1. And remember, the future of this historic decision is in your hands. Do not fail to vote. Closing news theme plays, ending the segment. The federal hearing chamber was full. At the front, the bench of collegiate judges rose above a platform of dark, polished and imposing wood. There were exactly 4 elevated chairs, each bearing a small crest carved into its backrest. Behind them, hoisted with meticulous precision, the flags of the United States of America and the United Nations fluttered side by side. On the right side of the room sat the prosecution benches, occupied by representatives from the International Public Prosecutor's Office and a group of United Nations diplomats. On the left were the defense seats, where 2 attorneys, a bald man in a gray suit and a young woman with sharp eyes, whispered to each other in anxious tones. The central seats in the section reserved for case participants were occupied by Americana, Wui, Astayam, Nayo, and the small robot Papandakarn, who shrank nervously between the chairs. In front of them, separated by 2 officers, sat the defendants. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker, her hair tied back, her hands trembling slightly in her lap, and Clyde Chestnut Barrow, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. The room was crowded with reporters, microphones, rotating cameras, cameramen standing on mobile platforms, and journalists scribbling frantically into their notepads as if afraid to miss a single moment. A court clerk, a middle-aged man with a resonant voice, entered the chamber and announced firmly, "All rise." The room fell silent. The audience stood. The photographers stepped back. The double doors of dark wood opened. The 4 members of the extraordinary federal collegiate walked straight down the aisle, their black robes gleaming beneath the crystal lights hanging from the ceiling. Each of them took their seat with solemnity. The judge seated at the center took the floor. "We are gathered in this extraordinary session to conclude the public review process regarding the case of Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow." He paused briefly as the camera flashes flickered. As everyone already knows, this is an unprecedented case. The assassination of the then Secretary General of the United Nations, Jean-Claude Lemire, was ultimately revealed to be the killing of Adolf Heinrich, a direct clone of Adolf Hitler, supported by verified documentation and irrefutable biological evidence. After the execution of the crime, the defendants welcomed 4 teenagers and 1 robot into their residence, forming personal bonds with them. Given this context, this collegiate body, in a unanimous decision, granted the 4 teenagers a right to interview both defendants and present their perspective to American society. The statements were published through social media platforms, TikTok, X, YouTube, and Instagram. Immediately afterward, all citizens of the United States were called to vote individually on whether or not to acquit each of the defendants, taking into account the facts, the evidence, the context, and the ethical impact of their actions. A complete silence fell over the room. The same court clerk stepped forward, holding a wax-sealed envelope bearing a crest. The judge took the envelope. He examined it, then stood up. The cameras adjusted. The reporters pressed their record buttons. Bonnie bit her lower lip. Clyde closed his eyes for a moment. Wooey held Americana's hand. Pappendackern trembled slightly and muttered. Blood pressure reading. Heart rate altered. Is assistance required? Quiet, Papa, whispered Americana. The judge broke the seal. He opened the envelope, pulled out the document, inhaled, and read aloud with the weight of someone about to mark history. In the present case, the people of the United States of America were summoned to exercise their sovereign power in response to an unprecedented event in modern history. Following broad analysis, national debate, and mass public participation, the consolidated vote shows that the overwhelming majority of citizens have voted that Bonnie Elizabeth Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow are to be. The paper in his hand began to vibrate. A small light appeared at its center, white, pulsing. The light grew, expanded, swallowed everything. Silence. No sound, no color, no camera, no chair. Americana felt as if a cold liquid were sliding down her spine. Her veins dilated. Her limbs felt weightless. Her heart beat without rhythm. Then she opened her eyes. She was back. Crown Eden, Main Hall, lying inside the chamber designed by the Tree of Knowledge. Gasping, dazed, she slowly turned her face. The canopy of the tree shimmered in green and gold. She lifted her gaze. Above, suspended in the living ceiling of the palace, the 4 avatars. Alexander, with eyes of flame. Mozart, smiling. Machiavelli, impassive as a riddle. Florence, watching with tenderness. They said not a single word, but they knew. And Americana knew too. The choice had been made.